What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. Week 10 is upon us, and here to talk a little ball is my guy, Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
It's one of those days, Harmon. It's, a little dreary out. We're kind of, some overcast fall weather. We're getting to that point in the season where, we've talked about so much stuff now, and you got to just keep powering through. And that's why I'm glad we actually have football to talk about right now, because when you get days like this in the off season, it's much, much worse. But we do have a ton of stuff that we got to go over, man. And I think it took me a little while to come up with them today, but I think I got 6 pretty good questions for us to go over.
Do you think it took a while for you to come up with the questions today because you feel like we're just in that point of the season where we've talked through everything, it's kind of getting a little repetitive, or that there's just still so much going on and so much information to take in that you're not sure where to focus? Because I know I struggle with the latter more than the former.
Yeah, I also think a big thing for me is I always want to give actionable information. So there's so much we can talk about, but actually pinning down what matters, what doesn't, what's going to be a useful conversation that's going to help fantasy managers manage their teams better, have a better chance to make the playoffs, all that sort of stuff. That I think is a big factor. Because when it just comes to NFL, we could talk all day long if we wanted to about a bunch of different stuff, but pinning down what matters most and what can help people most, I think that's when it gets a little trickier.
And see right there, that's why I'm glad that you're here, because I would absolutely spend 30 minutes meandering around a topic that might have no actionable takeaway, get to the end of it and be like, I don't know what we really thought. I don't know why we had that conversation. I don't really know what the takeaway is here. So thank God you're here to balance things out, Boone, and be the serious one on this program. But let's waste no more time. Let's get into it. Here's the structure of the show for the folks that are new to our weekly preview show. How could you be new here in week 10? And if you are, shout out to you. First 2 segments, that features Boone's 6-pack of questions, where he puts together those questions we were just talking about heading into each week's games. Segment number 3, that is literally no one's games of the week. I pick 3 games that are not headlines by any means, but you need to care about these lovable little freak shows for fantasy football. And segment number 4, rapid fire questions, the hurry up offense to get out of here on these weekly preview shows. So with that, let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions for week 10. All right, Boone, hit us with the first one. Let's go.
All right, let's kick it off. We got some very, very big matchups this week, so I want to talk through some of them and figure out exactly what matters most for fantasy. And the first thing here, the 49ers going against the Rams. And I know the 49ers beat the Rams earlier this season, but can this banged up version of the 49ers, can they actually slow down the Rams, who have just been crushing lately? And there's so many ways we could attack this. You could start with the 49ers defense, where we know they lost Nick Bosa. We know they lost Fred Warner. The hits just keep on coming here. And then on offense, is Brock Purdy going to get back anytime soon? It doesn't seem like he's going to be able to play this week. We're getting news that Brandon Ayuk, it seems like he's still a ways away. He's not coming back yet, even though Kyle Shanahan earlier in the year kind of talked about week 10 as a possibility. It is not happening this week. Ricky Pearsall's not practicing. So there are just so many guys hurt on this offense. And I know they kind of surprised everyone when they beat the Rams last time out. I just don't know if it's going to be able to happen again here, Harmon. And somehow the 49ers are still 6-3. They're right in the mix in the NFC West. I wonder, though, it's like a little bit smoke and mirrors at this point. Like, there are some very talented players on that team. I think they are very well coached, but I think they're going to be in trouble this week with the Rams coming to town. LA 4.5-point favorites, LA 6-2 on the season. And like I said earlier, they are just cruising, right? First in passing touchdowns, 8th in passing yards. Matthew Stafford has just basically shaken off all those injury concerns from the summer, totally shaken those off. The guy looks great. He's having a fantastic season. He's got at least 3 touchdown passes in 4 of his last 5 games, not multiple. Three touchdown passes is crazy. He's putting up 4 and 5 touchdown weeks. The guy's amazing. They've just been beaten up on some weaker teams lately too. They held the Lamar Jackson-less Ravens to 3 points. They held the Jags to 7 points. It was the Saints last time out, held them to 10 points. And I know that they lost to the 49ers earlier, but I think this is just such a different matchup this time around here, Harmon. I'm worried. I'm worried about the 49ers in this game. And I'm also worried that if the 49ers aren't going to get any of these reinforcements back soon, that we're going to start to see this team struggle in some of these tougher contests.
Yeah, last time this team went on the road to Los Angeles, the San Francisco 49ers, and beat this Rams team, I'm with you that I'm not 100% sure how instructive that will be for this matchup. Because number one, there was a lot. Again, we'll argue about this on the Niners side, but there are more name brand players available this time than there were for that last matchup. And I also think the Rams defense gets better and better every single week. So that's another talking point. But let's dial in on these Niners first before we talk about the Rams. You mentioned Brandon Ayuk. I saw this today from Jeff Mueller, JM Thrive PT on Twitter. Great injury follow. Was Absolutely. Noting that John Lynch had said today that in terms of why they had not activated Brandon Ayuk yet. They said they're getting close to opening the practice window. They've been saying that for a month now. So what is close, really? Hard to say. But he noted that quote, that was catastrophic. All 3 ligaments. He did a lot to his knee. So Jeff was saying, okay, we knew he tore multiple ligaments, but you just mentioned this about Matthew Stafford's touchdowns. Multiple doesn't always mean 3, you know? So that means he tore the ACL, the MCL, and probably the PCL as well. Jeff noted this. So obviously would have been great to get this information sooner, but this is exactly why, because I knew this was more than just like a clean ACL tear. It was I knew it was multi-ligament. I love Brandon Ayuk, but I've been saying since he tore that knee, I don't know when we're going to see the best of Brandon Ayuk, but it's probably not going to be 2025. Like, he is a guy that, unless you have an injury, like an IR spot, and I guess you're really competitive or something like that, he just probably shouldn't be on rosters even. And I hope he comes back and crushes it, because he is one of my favorite receivers in the league when he is on. But at this point, it could be in the playoffs or, again, even into 2026 that we see the best.
We're in week 10 and they're not opening up the 21-day window
correct.
Yet. So what does that tell you, right? And there's a few guys
and they need him, and they need him.
They absolutely do. Yeah, they absolutely do. They need a few of these guys back. Like, I know Mac Jones has done a pretty good job under center here, but they need Brock Purdy. Like, Brock Purdy is one of the better quarterbacks in the league in terms of fantasy, been a top 12 fantasy quarterback in back-to-back seasons on a per-game basis, and he keeps practicing in a limited fashion, and yet he's just not right. And he tried to come back at one point, and he aggravated the toe injury. So we just don't know when he's going to return. It's a lot of question marks, right? Now, fortunately, Christian McCaffrey is just matchup proof, and he proved it last time he played the Rams, right? Because they are really strong against the run. They held him to 57 rushing yards, not very efficient day on the ground, and yet 8 catches for 82 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. So he can get it done no matter who he's going up against. I don't know if this is going to be the spot for George Kittle to get going. We talked about Kittle's going to have some big games, and really he's another guy that could be matchup proof as well. Like, at any moment, if a game starts going crazy and gets into a shootout mode, George Kittle can be the guy that just takes over. So it's always possible, but on paper, this is not a great matchup for him in terms of the Rams stopping tight ends. Juwan Jennings, I think, is in that like wide receiver 3 flex range, but you're not overly excited, I think, about having him in your lineup. Kendrick Bourne, who I believe had a great game last time he played the Rams. He's in that like wide receiver 4 flex range. You know, last time around, he was like asked to be the number 1. They're not asking him to do that anymore here, but he's still a guy that you could look at as a flex option. I just don't think it's setting up very well for the 49ers. And if you have Christian McCaffrey, you feel good. If you have George Kittle, you're going to start George Kittle the rest of the way in every matchup unless he gets hurt. But other than that, there's a lot of questions here. And Mac Jones, who's also been somebody that's been a pretty good streamer, I don't think you want to play him going up against this Rams defense by any means.
Yeah. Mac Jones is one of the most pressure-sensitive quarterbacks in the league, and that was able to not be a problem in the last time these two teams faced off. But I just wonder if, more time to prepare, if they'll be able to kind of get that jump on them like they kind of did on that Thursday night game. Short week, obviously that was one of the more enjoyable and fun games to watch this season, that Niners-Rams game. But I think this is going to be a very different one, because the Rams are just really peaking right now, on the other side of their bye. Everything's going really well for them. And I will just say, my last note on the Niners, I am really growing to hate 2 things right now in life. Well, more than that, but in this specific situation. One, I really hate my multiple times weekly notification of Ricky Pearsall, knee, doesn't practice.
Yes.
Love that. And anytime I'm sorting, through wide receiver efficiency stuff, if I kick the threshold low enough, I'm also just constantly, it's a kick in the teeth to be reminded that Ricky Pearsall, when he was playing, was one of the most efficient per route receivers in the league. So anytime I'm doing research on receivers, I'm looking at route stats like, oh, right, there's Ricky Pearsall. Like, can we get that guy back at some point too? So I just wonder how much longer we deal with this zombie Niners team and what it looks like when everybody's healthy. But I feel like I've been saying that for almost 2 months now, and really since the beginning of the season. But now, especially just the last 2 months or so, it's been that way. But let's talk about the Rams here for a second, because I loved your note about Stafford, how strong he's been lately. He's playing at an MVP level. He's throwing more touchdowns this year than he did all of last season. He's a guy that I did not expect to be like a fantasy viable quarterback because, again, the passing touchdowns haven't been there. But Devontae Adams has just made this team so electric in the red zone, and he's been there to do that. That's why they signed him, and he's exactly that guy. He is what they were getting out of prime Odell Beckham. Not even prime Odell Beckham, but Odell Beckham during that Super Bowl run. Adams is just a better version of that. So he's been a huge hit in that regard. And it's made Matthew Stafford a guy that I think every single week you can consider a QB1, even though he doesn't have the rushing upside there.
Yeah, we know when you're a quarterback like Stafford, you have to have either the huge touchdown total, the huge yardage total, or both, because he's not going to give you anything on the ground. And yeah, he's doing it. He's putting up a huge touchdown total this season, and a big reason for it is Adams. Now, earlier this week, I wrote my buy sells column, and I'm curious what you think about this one because I feel like you're going to disagree with me, but I actually wrote up Adams as a guy that I think people should at least put feelers out to see what the price would be, what they could potentially get back for him. And part of this is like, and I don't know how you feel about this aspect, but if you're playing things like that, buy sell column is a little more like a stock market approach, right? Like you're looking at guys, you're trying to buy low, sell high. You're trying to see whose value is going to change over the next few weeks or the next month and try to get ahead of that before a guy's value goes down. And I mean, right now, like Devontae Adams, was it 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games? And one of those games, obviously, Puka Nacua wasn't out there. Can it get much better than this? Like, he's somebody that's been held to 60 yards or less in 6 of his 8 games this year. But we know he's always been a touchdown scorer, and he's scoring at a great clip this season. And yet, I don't know that it's going to get any better than it's been the last couple outings. So I kind of advise people that I think just go out and look and see, could you get somebody that I think might have a bit of a higher ceiling, might be a little more stable as a wide receiver 1? Could you potentially package him with something and get a really strong running back in return? I would just consider it. I mean, this is a guy that's going to turn 33 in December, and I do not want to be the one sitting on here talking bad about Devontae Adams. That is not my intention at all. The guy is awesome. The guy has been on many of my fantasy teams. I have him on teams this year. I want to see him continue to produce. And yet, if you just look at it overall and say, okay, like a guy who's going to turn 33 before the end of the season, a guy who's just has incredible efficiency in terms of his touchdown scoring, do you get off the ride here, Harmon, before maybe we see some of these lower yardage games where he doesn't find the end zone?
Yeah, it's just among receivers with 50-plus targets right now, he is second in terms of touchdown rate, as you mentioned, 11.4%. He's 19th in yards per game. So that is definitely – there's some regression potential there. And when he doesn't score a touchdown, I think – not that it's going to hurt you because he's not, a complete touchdown or bust play, but he probably goes from being a wide receiver 1 on the week to more of a wide receiver 3. Again, not somebody that's cratering your lineup or anything like that, but I kind of think he's in that zone there. At the same time, though, I'm hesitant to call him a sell high just because sometimes it's just about getting the right offense for these guys. And I think the Rams are that, like, for example, on the other end of it, the guy who's ahead of him in touchdown rate is Quentin Johnston, and he averages slightly fewer yards per game in this cohort. And that offense, I think, is going the other direction just because of the offensive line concerns, whereas the Rams, again, are kind of peaking. So I think it depends. He's not a guy that I would hate selling. I don't think the age part of it has anything to do with it, but just that's kind of my thoughts on it. I hear where you're coming from. I'm not sure if I'm all the way there, though.
No, I figured that you might disagree with that one. I figured a lot of people might disagree with that one. And I want to be bold with those picks. I don't want to just tell people to like sell very obvious players. So that was one that, I knew people would have a little bit of pushback on, but it's just a matter of, do you think a guy like him who has this year been fairly dependent on the touchdown scoring, Is he going to continue to produce at a top 8 fantasy wide receiver clip, or might that kind of come back down a bit? And do you want to potentially move him if you can find someone that's willing to pay up for that, top 8, top 10 kind of value? I would consider it. And there's a lot of guys in that range that you could look to. People can go check out my trade value charts as well to get an idea of some of the other names in that range. Just seeing if there's somebody that you maybe feel a little more confident in, or somebody that you think could maybe have a stronger finish to the season, just in case we get a little bit of regression here on the touchdown scoring from Adams. But yes, he's still going to be a great player for you. I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden he's going to fall off a cliff here. I'm just looking to potentially cash out high on a guy who has scored an incredible amount of fantasy points based on his touchdowns the last couple times out.
Totally fair. Again, just last note on Adams too. The Rams played a ton of 13 and multiple 13 personnel, multiple tight end sets. That is to get mismatches, and that is going to push targets to the wide receiver. And if there's one wide receiver on the field, it's probably more often than not going to be Devontae Adams. It's not going to be Puka Nacua, just because of the role that he plays and kind of how they're going to. I haven't actually looked at that in terms of the personnel that was on the field last week, and that might be skewed because Puka was hurt, but just more ways that Adams can end up getting a lot of targets. But speaking of the Rams here, last point, you wanted to talk about Blake Corum, and I think this is a really important thing to bring up right now.
Just that he is a potential flex option. We're seeing him have a lot of success. And I mean, let's face it, most running backs in the Sean McVay backfield do have success, but he is starting to produce on the touches that he's getting. And some of that, again, is the matchups that he's had recently. And I talked about those 3 pretty easy matchups. So he's going to get more work in games when they're absolutely blowing teams out, of course. So you got to factor in that context to all of it. But he's played really well this year. And before the season, I thought there was a shot that the rookie, that Jarquez Hunter, could potentially take over that number 2 job. But Corum looks fantastic. And if we see Kyren Williams go down, this is the kind of guy you're talking about as a potential league winner in a backfield that likes to feature the guys that they trust. And he has proven now that he is someone that they trust here. So I don't know if the 49ers matchup is going to be a game that he's going to have a huge performance in. But overall, somebody that needs to be rostered everywhere. And I have to put his name in my waiver wire column every single week because he is still well under that 50% rostered mark. And yet I'm surprised every time because, he is one of the top backup running backs that people should be stashing, especially this time of year, like we talked about on Monday, when you start to get through some of these buys, you have these available spots on your bench. This is exactly the kind of player that you should be going after.
1,000%. Love that note. And Corum, he would be one of, if not, maybe top 2 or 3 best backup running back stashes right now, I would guess, in my mind. If anything happened to Kyren Williams, he would immediately be a fantasy starter. And if you are desperate this week, this Niners defense is not good. It is a very, very banged up injury that just lost a very, very banged up unit that just lost another player due to injury, Michael Williams, their rookie, who is a much better run player than he is a pass player right now as well. So a lot to consider there with this matchup. But let's stick in the NFC West and get to your second question this week.
Oh, this is another one that I hate to even put this out there, but is this the week that Jacoby Brissett and that Cardinals offense maybe comes back to earth a little bit, Harmon? We've seen them just having fantastic outings and everyone is behind them, and poor Kyler Murray is now on IR. I feel bad for the guy, the way that it just seems like everyone's so excited because for fantasy, finally, we're getting some of these guys in this offense like Marvin Harrison Jr., who were struggling to be consistent out there with Kyler Murray. Now we're seeing him produce. We're seeing him have great games and maybe look like he could become that wide receiver 1 that we thought he could be. You look at somebody like Trey McBride, who struggled to find the end zone, and now all of a sudden Jacoby Brissett's out there and he's visiting the end zone every single week. It's not a problem at all. But I think we got to look at the way this all happened, right? And we talked earlier in the season, remember we talked about the Bengals offense when Jake Browning got out there. And if you weren't looking at the matchups and you just went, wow, this guy looks terrible. And yet they had some very difficult matchups. And then the schedule got a little bit easier, but Jake Browning wasn't the quarterback. Joe Flacco was. And now Joe Flacco is absolutely rolling with that offense. Well, there might be a little bit of that going on here, right? Because Jacoby Brissett's been a top 12 fantasy quarterback all 3 of his starts, but they're about to get their hardest challenge here, right? And Seattle is a fantastic defense. We've talked about them before. They've only given up 260 passing yards or more to 1 quarterback this season. They're permitting the 13th fewest fantasy points to the position. Brissett actually started against these guys last year. Now, he was a member of the Patriots in that game, so much different situation, but 149 passing yards and a touchdown. It's not apples to apples, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Still.
And it's just to show that, like, the Seahawks defense is legit. We've seen them stifle plenty of quarterbacks. And I wonder here if this is just going to be a much tougher matchup than what they've dealt with recently, getting to go against the likes of the Cowboys and stuff, where they can run up, they can move the ball pretty easily, like all those sorts of things. So I think we have to take that into account. Fantasy wise, I mean, it's kind of a bad matchup for everybody except for Trey McBride. So Trey McBride, like, come on down on this one, because if you're going to start anybody from this offense, he's certainly the one. 7 for 52 against this team in a previous matchup, 7 for 70, 12 for 133. Those are his last 3 games against them over the last 2 years here. So you're never benching McBride, but this is a spot where he can still certainly get home. I don't know that you're going to want to bench Marvin Harrison Jr. Either, because of what we've seen from him recently, right? Like, he's looked really good. Brissett's able to find him. He's been making plays. So I think you still put him out there, and now he's in that low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 range. And he's looked pretty good. I'd love to hear your take on Marvin Harrison Jr. And then the running backs, they're the risky ones, right? And I'm curious if you've heard anything about Trey Benson, because I have not heard anything about Trey Benson, Harmon. And this was the week where he was supposed to be able to come back, and we're not even getting like an update that he's back on the field or any sort of updated timeline for when he's going to be back. So it ends up being Amari DeMercado and Bam Knight, and it could be a hot hand situation, and it's just kind of not fun for fantasy by any means. But overall, I just wonder if this is the week when maybe the music is going to stop here for the Cardinals, because they've had some very easy matchups like the Cowboys last time out, where they've been able to put up points. And now I think the Seahawks in a divisional game are potentially going to step up and give them a much harder time here.
Oh, like 100%, dude. There's no bigger whiplash than facing what Dallas put on the field on this past game, and then what they're going to go against in Seattle. I think Seattle is the most difficult defense to play against in the NFL right now, because, and specifically with what Arizona likes to do, which is to get into these big, heavy formations, a lot of tight ends on the field, and run the football, which they can't do, and you can't really run on Seattle anyways because they have a great front. And they also just basically can play nickel on the field all the time, whereas on the inverse of it, Seattle ends up getting all these teams in base personnel on defense, and then they just throw like shots all day. Well, number one, Arizona is going to struggle with that because they can't pass protect. Even as I've been really excited about some of these, Jacoby Brissett under center plays, he's getting sacked when he's under center on like 20% of his dropbacks, which is absurd because the protection's not good. And he's also a complete statue back there. He is no, he can only move forward on the sneak. That's it. That's the only movement Jacoby Brissett is doing. You get him off his spot, I don't think he's going to do a lot for you. And again, because Seattle has Nick Emmanwori, who has just been an absolute monster this year, they can just play nickel all the time. And I will never forget watching, Nick Emmanwori, who is massive, and Jalen Noel, who's not quite massive but is very, very fast, like run with Jalen Noel, run like the hook from the slot the whole time, and like stick with him. So it's just a particularly bad matchup for what Arizona wants to do. The only way that they could do it, obviously, you get Trey McBride going, but I wonder how. I mean, that's kind of tough with some of their Ernest Jones being potentially banged up in this game. That might matter for Trey McBride, but obviously McBride's the tempo setter there. What you really have to do is try to take shots on the perimeter against, Tariq Woolen or any of these guys with Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has played really well for the last few weeks, and I think him and Brissett have a good thing going. The way Brissett talks about Marv after listening to Kyler talk about Marv for the last 2 years is really encouraging. So that's nice to see, but I do think that the matchup is really difficult unless they can just pepper Marvin Harrison for big plays on the outside, which, given the pass protection woes, I'm a little skeptical about that happening.
Yeah, and I think you laid it out very well there, but just the idea that like there could be a reality check for a journeyman backup quarterback who was just taking everyone by storm the last few weeks, like it's coming at some point, right? This seems like an obvious spot for it, which means it probably won't happen this time around. He'll throw for 4 touchdowns, and then it'll be a really easy matchup where the wheels fall off for him. But he's been great. He gives us a lot of hope, and Brissett, who I'm talking about, he gives us a lot of hope for this offense the rest of the season. And hopefully, I mean, we're going to talk about some backfields later, but hopefully Trey Benson can come back at some point, because this is going to be an interesting offense to see him in if he can come back and be the starter and kind of consolidate that backfield, as opposed to like this mishmash committee that we've seen over the last few weeks here. Now on the Seahawks side, I don't know if you want to talk about them a little bit, right?
Real quick, just last thing on the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Just because you mentioned Trey Benson, like, I do think we have to remember, as much as this coaching staff wants to trade for to save their jobs, they should be in evaluation mode. They should be like wanting to get a look at Trey Benson to say, hey, James Conner's probably not back with the team next year, at least in a full featured capacity. Probably just not back with the team next year. They need to know if Trey Benson's their future guy. Again, they need to know like what level of load-bearing receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. can be. And I just think, Boone, that this Jacoby Brissett stuff, it's all about, hey, when we go into a game where we have a good matchup on defense, like we did last week, I think we have more faith that Jacoby Brissett can run the offense and can actually get like Marvin Harrison Jr. to a ceiling game. Like when they play the Niners in week 11, when they play the Bengals in week 17, it's like, okay, well now I feel we could feel better about this offense hitting in those scenarios. With Murray, it was just always so weird and up and down because of the mishmash fit of him and the offense. But still, when they face defenses like this, I still think it's going to be problematic here. But anyways, I just wanted to get that note.
No, and I feel bad too. Like, I feel like I was kind of very against Kyler in terms of like how much people were talking about him, how many people had him rostered on their teams. And I kept telling everyone like, he hasn't been a good fantasy quarterback. You should be dropping him. But now I feel like the pendulum's gone too far the other way. Like everyone's just crushing the poor guy, right down to like you're saying with like Marvin Harrison Jr. being like, oh, like we have a leader. It feels so great to have a leader in the huddle and stuff. Like, oh my God, like just piling on the poor guy. But it's real. It is definitely real. And there's something to be said for having that like capable, steady veteran out there that can spread the ball around, that can get the ball where it needs to be to these guys. And you can let the talent shine through. And somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. is showing that he could do it all along. And of course he's developed along the way as well. He's not the same player he was when he first came in the league and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, we're starting to see what he's capable of, and maybe that ceiling is still potentially within reach for him. And who would have thought that it would have taken Jacoby Brissett to unlock it? But this is where we are.
Anything on the Seahawks here real quick before we jump to the third question?
Now that I think about it, we've talked about them a bunch. We talked about them on Monday when I brought up the Sam Darnold stuff, because Sam Darnold is a guy that you could look to as a potential streamer this week. We don't need to talk about the backfield much more because we went off on that on Monday. So no, let's keep going. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, and we've certainly talked enough about the receivers this week after the Rashid Shaheed trade and the Torrey Horton breakout. And I'd love to have, again, that'd be great. 30-minute conversation about JSN with no actionable takeaways except, yeah, he's awesome. Congratulations for drafting him. That's a perfect Matt Harmon conversation, but we're not going to have that. I have this conversation in your third question all the time, so I'm actually really interested to hear what you have to say about this one.
So the question here is just, where's the value in the Packers offense? And now there's a caveat, because we could have asked that before, like you said. Now it's, where's the value in the Packers offense with our guy Tucker Kraft done for the year? Like, where do we look here, Harmon? And also, just, is this like a potential bad sign for this offense? Like, not having arguably their best player on offense? Like, yeah, is that even debatable? Like, he has been fantastic.
I think it's inarguable.
A huge breakout year for him. They made a point to get him the ball. We heard all offseason from Jordan Love and everybody around the organization that they were going to find ways to get Tucker Kraft the ball. They come out, they do it, and now he's done for the year. So where do we go from here, kind of thing? And the first spot we look at is tight end. And I talked about Luke Musgrave on Monday, right? Like, he's somebody that isn't the same kind of player as Kraft. He's not that yak guy. He's not the same kind of blocker, but he kind of brings like a different element, right? Like, he could be a little more of that like explosive downfield weapon, more of like a big play guy. And we've seen it produce. It's been a little while, but if you go back to the rookie season when he came out of the gate and he was the starter there, he was putting up some yards, like 49 yards 4 times in his first 9 NFL games. That's not nothing for a rookie tight end, right? So you wonder, like, it's been a little bit of time. He's been riding the bench or kind of playing like a limited role since then. There's been some injuries along the way as well, but where is he at in his NFL career and in his development? And can he step in and give this offense something? And then are they going to even give him enough targets to make him fantasy relevant? Because I would put him in the conversation as one of those potential like tight end 2 streamers, but there's also like a lot of guys in that range, right? Like I could just rattle off like Harold Fannin and Colston Loveland, Juwan Johnson, Theo Johnson, Dalton Schultz, Cade Otton, Mason Taylor. Like those are all guys that you're going to consider like around that range, or a few of them. I mean, Fannin, Loveland, Juwan Johnson, I would have pretty clearly ahead of Musgrave, but there's just a lot of guys in that range that a bunch of them were available on the waiver wire this week. A bunch of them are still available on the waiver wire you could go and get. So he's in consideration against those guys. And the matchup this week, I mean, it's not necessarily the best spot for him either, right? Going against the Eagles, they're the 3rd toughest opponent for fantasy tight end. So it's not necessarily you want to grab him and put him in your lineup as a streamer right away. Maybe you want to grab him and stash him. And I wrote him up in my deep stashes column that went up today as a guy that, yeah, you grab, you see, can he give you something? Can he give you 70, 80% of Tucker Kraft's production? In which case, then, yeah, he would absolutely be somebody that you want to put in your fantasy lineup. But there's just a lot of questions about this offense now, too. When you take away their best pass catching threat, where does that ball go now? And Romeo Doubs has been really good, like overall. Like if you look at his fantasy numbers on a per game basis this year, wide receiver 25. He's only finished the wide receiver 25 or better twice. And a lot of that work is coming from that 3 touchdown game, right? A lot of heavy lifting from that one. But now with Kraft out, with Jaden Reed's another guy where like I haven't seen an update on him. We're not really sure when he's coming back. Matthew Golden's banged up. I think he's limited in practice right now. We'll see if he's going to be able to play this week or if he's going to be less than 100%. Could we see Doubs maybe take on a little bit more, which is what happened last week, right? With Kraft leading that game, we saw Doubs have a pretty good performance, 7 catches, 91 yards, 10 targets. That was the first time that he's gotten double-digit targets this season. I think he is a guy that definitely could step up in this offense. Jordan Love clearly likes him. He's targeted him. He's talked about loving targeting him before in past years. So I think you're looking at Doubs as an obvious high-end wide receiver 3, a guy who has a chance to potentially become a wide receiver 2, a top 24 fantasy receiver moving forward, at least until we see some of these other guys potentially come back like Jaden Reed, or until we see Golden get healthy and maybe start to do something more. And then Christian Watson, I think, is very, very interesting because for this guy to come back from a serious injury and have like pretty good performances, 85 yards and 58 yards in his first 2 games back off the injury, that shows that he can make plays. Now, he's another kind of boomer bust guy. He needs the big plays. He needs the touchdowns. Another guy that's not necessarily going to get a ton of volume, but he's shown in the past too that he can score the touchdowns. He can have these decent fantasy days on lower target shares. So I think he's somebody that's interesting that should be picked up and rostered in more leagues. Romeo Doubs is somebody you'd have to probably trade for to get him at this point, but there's got to be some value here, doesn't there, Harmon? Like someone's going to catch the ball in this offense. We have faith in Matt LaFleur. So who is it going to be? Who's going to be the guy, or who are going to be the guys who step up in the absence of Tucker Kraft?
I don't want to overreact here, but this Tucker Kraft injury is such a big deal. Like it's such a big deal. And I think this offense could be in, I don't want to say real trouble, but some degree of trouble here, because I think people forget, number one, this run game has not been all that good this year. They're really high from a success rate standpoint because they don't take a lot of negative runs, but they also don't get, they get very, very few explosive runs so far this year. Yeah. And now you're removing a player in Tucker Kraft who is such a weapon and such an asset in the blocking game as a tight end. And you're going to put Tucker Kraft on you're going to put Luke Musgrave on the field. Luke Musgrave can't block. I mean, we were just showing that practice highlight of him. That is a long, lanky dude at the tight end position. He is not that player there. That's problematic. And LaFleur is like stubbornly committed to this run game as if it is really good. And I think that has been a little bit of a problem so far. Like when they run in a lot of these second and long situations, I think it's set them back offensively. And I really love what Romeo Doubs has done this year. I am also worried that is he going to get the Quinyon Mitchell treatment from Philadelphia coming off their bye, in this game? Like this, even if I'm excited about Romeo Doubs and what I love what I've seen from this year, really, really high on Romeo Doubs right now. But going into this matchup, that's kind of problematic. And the rest of these receivers, it's been nice to see Christian Watson get back out there, and he will make a shot play, maybe a couple times a game. And I agree with you. He probably should be rostered at this point, especially in deeper leagues. Everybody else, though, it's just they're so banged up. They miss Jaden Reed so badly. You were 100% right about Matthew Golden should have been in the coping corner when you brought it up, because he has been as a player in isolation, and he's not getting any targets. He's just not that reliable right now from a production standpoint. I don't think he's been bad in isolation, but he's not been like a needle mover. He's just kind of been like a poor man's version of Jaden Reed. And I say that as somebody that's really, really high on Jaden Reed. So that's not that big of a diss to me. But yeah, there's a lot of questions here, and I don't really have any good answers. I'm open to Luke Musgrave being, like you said, 70-80% of Tucker Kraft from a receiver perspective. I can see that. But what you're losing from a blocking standpoint and just how off this run game feels right now, I wonder if the Packers go from a clearly circle of trust offense to an offense that's, again, I'm not going to say problematic, but just kind of a whatever offense, like maybe 13th best, 14th best in the NFL. And in that case, we're now talking about this widespread target tree on the 14th best offense in the NFL, as opposed to one that's been like a top 5 unit the last few years. So those are just some of my concerns here with everything. And again, I might be overreacting because of the Panthers game last week in terms of the commitment to the run game and everything like that. But those are just kind of my worries right now.
No, I think it's totally valid. And you wonder too, like in the short term and having a matchup against a defense like the Eagles, which is not the easiest matchup out there, having that game in the short term here, are there going to be like some growing pains as they try to figure out what they're going to do without Tucker Kraft? I think that is totally possible. Now they get the Giants the week after, so maybe that's more of a get right spot.
Yeah,
so maybe we
better.
shouldn't overreact if they come out and struggle a bit this week as well, because maybe they will get it right the week after. But yeah, I think it's totally a concern moving forward, especially though in this game, because we don't have anything to go off of. And like you said, it's not just what he did in the passing game. His value as a blocker in the run game is huge, and it's something people probably don't talk about enough. And not having him out there is going to change the offense. It's the same as when George Kittle's not out there for the 49ers, right? George Kittle's value as a blocker, even though everyone thinks about him as this fantasy asset, and well, maybe not recently because he hasn't had great performances, but everybody thinks about him as this guy that has these huge multi-touchdown games and big yardage once in a while and can help you win fantasy weeks. And yet he is arguably the best all-around tight end in the league because of what he can do as a blocker as well. So you take away a guy like Tucker Kraft, and yeah, it's going to change things quite a bit, and we'll see how they match up with the Eagles, but I don't think it's necessarily the best spot. But really, like, you're probably going to start Romeo Doubs. I don't know that you really want to start Christian Watson this week. Josh Jacobs, of course. And other than that, like, Jordan Love now takes another hit to his value. He hasn't been particularly good for fantasy this year. He's had a couple decent games, but overall, not somebody that you feel great starting week in and week out unless he's in a good matchup, which this isn't. And he just lost his best pass catcher. So I think it's a bit of a stay away for me, other than those two obvious starts in this offense. And then we'll reassess after we see what it looks like against the Eagles.
Yeah. As the Tucker Kraft podcast of this offseason, it feels appropriate that this is, again, probably the last time that we will talk about Tucker Kraft this year, which that was tough to say, but it's probably the last time we'll talk about Tucker Kraft this year. And it feels like the right way to go out, just re-emphasizing, like, I don't think people realize how good he is and how important he is, that losing him is akin to losing a George Kittle type player, because that was the level of guy he had graduated into. So we will definitely have to reassess what the Packers look like after this week when we get a look at what the offense is without him. We are going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk Colts. We're going to talk some backfields that you should be maybe concerned about after the trade deadline. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing through Boone's 6-pack of questions heading into week 10. Boone, let's get into the fourth.
Should I should I give you a little hat tip and admit that you were the one that kind of pointed me in this direction, Harmon, or what? We're going to hear a lot from you, I think, for this one. But that 1 week kind of bad game, the first really bad performance from the Colts, was that just a 1 week blip for them, or is it actually a reason to be concerned? And I think the reason that you wanted me to talk about this is because you wrote an extensive article about it this week. So I think you're going to have a lot to say, and I'm going to pass it off to you. We'll let you go ISO ball. I will clear the lane in a minute, but I want to bring up one thing first, because I'm curious if you are going to agree with this. I think you might disagree with this. And that's, again, going back to that buy sell column. I told people, I think maybe this is the spot to move off of Daniel Jones. And I know a lot of people are going to think that's crazy. He's been a top 10 fantasy quarterback this year. He's had a ton of great games. And you don't want to overreact to one bad game, but it's more than just that, right? So one bad game and how bad it was, that starts to put like a little bit of uncertainty into that public perception. A little bit of doubt. Is Daniel Jones going to turn back into a pumpkin and become the guy that we've known year after year? I don't think that's going to happen necessarily, but I think over the next month, he's going to have a much tougher go of it. So he's traveling to Berlin for this game against the Falcons this week. Yes, we are back in Europe early Sunday morning for a game. So make sure you're setting your lineups and get up early for that one. And going against Atlanta, I mean, they've been like a really up and down defense. We've seen some highs from them. We've also seen like some absolute stinkers from that defense, and it's been a little bit tough to predict at times. But in the end, they've really only given up 2 big games to quarterbacks. Now, if Jones fares well in this matchup, then I think his value will probably be okay, and then he'll go on bye. But if he struggles, then he goes on bye. Then he has to come back against the Chiefs and the Texans in weeks 12 and 13. So over the next month, I just don't know if he is going to perform very well against 3 defenses that are inside the top 10 in terms of the fewest fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks this year. That's the concern. It's not that I think he's going to be bad the rest of the season. It's not that I think the wheels are going to fall off for him. It's just that over the next month, he's coming off a bad game. So that kind of increases the fear that people will have that if he has another game, boom, his value drops. And now he has these 3 tough matchups overall. Am I overreacting, Harmon? Is it crazy to think of maybe packaging him and getting him out of your lineup in a trade? Is it too much like stock market and not enough real football approach on this one?
Well, I actually think that approaching it like a stock market at the quarterback position does make sense to me, because it just like if you can cash out on a quarterback who's not an elite quarterback, it's replaceable. Like if you're struggling at running back or wide receiver or something, and you're able to cash out on Daniel Jones, I think that's totally fine, almost regardless of what I think about from a regression standpoint or the offense or anything like that. So no, I think that's totally fine. In terms of
even if they're not cashing out, I will also say like the idea of maybe you want to consider some streaming options over him in some of these games. And I don't know if the Falcons game is going to be that one, but going up against the Chiefs, going up against that Texans defense, he's going to be a little further down my rankings. And there might be some guys, depending on matchups, that are in the waiver wire column that are streamers for those weeks that might sneak ahead of him. So even if you're not trading him away, you just might want to put some thought that he's not like a set it and forget it starter, that he's potentially going to be a guy that you're going to consider some other options against.
Okay, see, that's where I think we might part ways here on the take. And just to reference the piece that I wrote today, which, by the way, you said was an extensive piece. It was like 1,300 words. That's child's play. Please. Okay. 1,300 words is nothing. All right.
I'm trying to give you props here. Come on. Don't downplay it. It's a nice article. You wrote a nice article on them.
It was fine. It's fine. But yes, I did hyper focus on this Colts matchup that happened last week. So I think this kind of gives us a jumping off point about the question here is, was this a fluke or did we see a blueprint established to beat this Colts offense? And I think coming away from the conclusion I came away with it is not only do I not think that this is a blueprint that was established by Pittsburgh this past week, I actually come out of this game more encouraged and more willing to buy on the Colts pass catchers, specifically the 3 receivers. And I'll kind of outline my reasoning for that. Number one, in terms of this defensive matchup, I think I brought this up with Chris Allen on Sunday, but Next Gen Stats noted that the Steelers played more split safety coverage this year than they have at any other point. They came in as the lowest rate of split safeties in the league, which I just think you come into it, you see something different from an opponent, completely different than what you scouted, in addition to the fact that Jalen Ramsey, who was kind of like a problem player at corner, and I think really would have been a target player for this Colts offense, he played safety on 84% of his snaps. Like, that completely flips up the game plan. And then the defensive front just took over. I believe 11 players from the Pittsburgh Steelers had pressures in this game. Multiple guys had 10 players in total, according to PFF, recorded a pressure from the Steelers in this game. 7 of them recorded 2 or more, including 4 from Alex Highsmith. So then it's like, okay, Daniel Jones had to hold the ball a little bit longer because the coverage is not what we were expecting. And then the pressure just takes over up front, and that obviously caused some problems for Jones. He was like 8 of 13 under pressure. That was 6 of 13 under pressure. So that's sort of what happened in this game. But how many other teams are, one, going to have an excellent front like Pittsburgh has and just completely change up their coverage menu going into it? So I think that was kind of an outlier in terms of how bad this was. And then from the fantasy angle of this and how it goes to these pass catchers, this team still had a 50% offensive success rate in this game. That was 13th best last week. It wasn't as if the offense completely cratered. Obviously, Jones turned the ball over a ton, which hurt him in fantasy. So maybe that kind of gives credence to your take. But this was also a reminder, Boone, that this is a pass-first team. 50 passes for Daniel Jones to 14 for Jonathan Taylor. Of course, it had to do with the game script. But if you look at it on the year, this team is 4th in neutral pass rate. When they're in 2nd and long, they throw the football. Like, people think it's a run first team because what they did under Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the year he's having. But if we're going to get Daniel Jones in some of these negative game scripts, this is already a pass first team. Then they're going to go from, hey, we throw to get the lead and run to secure the lead, to we're just throwing, which is how you're going to get these monster target totals for Michael Pittman, 12, Alec Pierce, 13, Josh Downs, 9. So I actually think these receivers, even if the schedule gets harder, in a weird way, I come out of this week thinking, like, I think the offense will be fine. And I think that you can be excited about these receivers being higher volume players than they have been to this point of the year. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I agree. I really like the receivers. I mean, we talked about Alec Pierce being someone that I was recommending everybody pick up earlier in the week. Michael Pittman, obviously is having a good season. And Shane Steichen, like, you hit on the fact that they play at a pretty quick pace. They've done that for years. Like, that's kind of always been Shane Steichen's way, even when he didn't have a decent quarterback play, which he's getting this year. They always tried to play at a quick pace. Now they're just having some success. And so it's all kind of coming together for them here. But yeah, I do wonder still, Harmon, like, I wonder, like, if a defense like the Steelers can get after them this week. Yes, there aren't that many out there that are going to get the kind of pressure that the Steelers got this week. But I worry about some of these matchups, including one that I didn't mention, which is the first week of the fantasy playoffs. Daniel Jones goes up against that Seahawks defense that we just talked about earlier. So that's another spot, I think, where are you going to feel comfortable? It's like, Sam Darnold makes it to the playoffs in real life and you go, oh, it's still Sam Darnold. And then he absolutely falls on his face. I would worry that if you've trusted Daniel Jones in your fantasy lineup all year long and you get to that first week of the playoffs, are you going to feel good about having him in your lineup and clicking his name and putting him in there in a tough matchup like that? I would be very worried, and I would be considering other potential streaming options that week. So that's just what it comes down to for me. I think mine is more like a fantasy take, looking at potentially cashing out on Daniel Jones and just how good this offense has been, and can they continue to produce like this? That's where my concern comes from. Obviously, JT is going to be great. I think the receivers are still going to have a ton of value. Tyler Warren is awesome, even though he's had some down games recently, but he is still one of the best tight end plays week in and week out. So you want pieces of this offense overall. I think Daniel Jones is the one guy where in some of these tougher matchups, I'm just going to be a little more worried, and I might have him ranked a little lower than some people in those games. And on teams where you have him, I think you might want to consider other options depending how good the streamers are, which some weeks, let's face it, the streamers aren't necessarily that great. But let's say a guy like Marcus Mariota, if he has a really good matchup in one of those weeks where we have Daniel Jones in a tough one. I think that's the kind of guy where you could potentially consider him above because he's in that low end QB1 kind of high end QB2 conversation for fantasy. And that's where I think Daniel Jones is going to be in these tougher matchups.
You know what's funny is we're talking about this. I actually kind of think that the two players you might want to sell from this team are, and this would be like such big fish sell, but like if this team's going to be in more negative game script, like we just saw this, Jonathan Taylor is going to be the guy who's not going to have these monster weeks. And the other guy would be Tyler Warren, who primarily has been targeted. Ryan Heath noted this. An absurd amount of his targets have come on play action and kind of the designery stuff, which is when they get to the true dropback stuff. That's when it goes to Downs. He gets the boost. That's when it goes to like Pierce and Michael Pittman as well. So it just, again, this is a great time to have this conversation because it's the midway point of the year. And what we've seen from the Colts so far has truly been historic. And that's not me exaggerating or anything. They averaged the most points per drive in any offense since 2001, 3.25. Even after this game, they're still number one, better than Brady's Patriots year 2007 with Randy Moss, better than Pat Mahomes 2018 first season starting, better than Aaron Rodgers' first comeback of the back-to-back ones, the MVP seasons. So that's what this offense has been. So if there is regression, to your point, it might be regressing from a historic offense to a really good offense. But then we have to decide, okay, who are the pieces that lose out here? And I'm not even saying that, yeah, you should sell JT or Tyler Warren or anything, but that's kind of like a working theory that I'm kind of thinking about right now. And again, let's put a pin in this because I think we've talked it out. But now we'll just kind of have to monitor this going forward. And this Falcons matchup in Europe here in Germany, Alec Pierce is set up well because of the single high stuff, but that I talked about earlier this week. Other than that, though, this is definitely one where it'll be kind of a referendum game because it's coming off this Steelers game. The Falcons defense has been good, and it's an island game. So, again, just to hammer the point home, Alec Pierce, second highest yards per route run against single high this year. Scott Barrett, I saw, noted this, and the Falcons run single high over 70%, like the highest rate in the league. So we're going to continue to see, I think, Alec Pierce get those deep shots. But all right, that's enough Colts nonsense. Let's get to your next talking point here.
Turn it into a Colts show. Let's go to some of these backfields. I want to talk about running backs for the next couple questions here. And the first one, this goes back to Tuesday and trade deadline. You and I haven't really had a chance to talk about this, but I know on the show you went over all the trades that happened. What about the trades that didn't happen? What's the outlook for some of these backfields that actually didn't make a move at the deadline, who we talked about potentially needing to make a move, or would it be wise, or they were rumored to potentially do it? And they didn't. So the first one is the Patriots, right? Ramondre Stevenson still injured, still not practicing. Travion Henderson has been out there and playing fairly well, showing some signs of life here. And we've also seen Terrell Jennings getting involved as the second back there. The Chargers, Kamani Vidal, he's been the guy. He's coming off a down game, but he's had a couple big performances as well. And Amarian Hampton is another one of these guys, maybe even worse than Trey Benson, where we don't know when he's coming back. And the latest quotes about him are like Jim Harbaugh saying that, well, we're not going to activate him until after the week 12 bye. Not going to activate the 21-day window until after the week 12 bye, 21 days. So when is he going to return? We actually have no clue. That could put him out until well into December. The Bears, I mean, Swift was banged up, but he's back to a full practice. Kamanungai goes off in that game where he misses. So what does this backfield look like if DeAndre Swift is back this week, which it seems like he's going to be? The Cardinals, the no word on Benson, the DeMercado, getting some work out there. Him looking like potentially the most valuable back last time out. But like I said earlier, I think it could be a hot hand situation. And then the Chiefs are on bye. And I think this is the one that really hurts, right? Because it sounds like they were not that far off in potentially getting Breece Hall, and they don't make the move to do it. They don't pony up the, third round pick. They just offer a fourth. And now we're going to be left with Isaiah Pacheco if he's healthy. And then, Kareem Hunt being that goal line vulture, and Brashard Smith getting some work in the receiving game, and just kind of this overall not great committee for fantasy. So I don't know if you have thoughts on any of those in particular. I could talk more about them, but I'll throw it to you. Is there any backfield there that kind of gets you particularly interested after they didn't make a move at the deadline?
Yeah, the Bears one just because, of course DeAndre Swift is back. He saw Kyle Monungai's game last week. He's like, oh, I'm feeling good, coach.
Chuba Hubbard syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, actually, groin's pretty loose. I'm feeling good. Let me get back out on the field there. I can't be having Kyle Monungai out here shining every single week trying to take my job.
Not always the best move to rush back.
Great point. Not always the best move. But I'm really interested, at least this week, just to see what that split looks like, because we've seen Ben Johnson push DeAndre Swift to the side before. We've seen this story in both of their NFL careers at the time together in Detroit. So I do think Kyle Monungai is a guy that they really trust right now. So there's a chance that I'm not going to say Kyle Monungai is the lead back right away. But I'm open to the possibility that is the truth in a month's time from now. So that's just one I really want to keep an eye on. These other ones, I mean, it's just kind of, they're all a little bit messy. I'm not sure that there's great fantasy value in any of them other than Chargers with Kamani Vidal. I always kind of thought they wouldn't make a move just because I think they liked what they've gotten out of Vidal at times. And he's coming off a down game, but I know Joe Alt obviously hurts, but he's generally a guy that I think is still in the running back 2 range. He's just going to be a little bit more volatile without Joe Alt. But the one I wanted to ask you about was the last one that you mentioned, the Chiefs almost trading for Breece Hall. Of course, Breece Hall is still with the Jets, and we all know that Breece Hall does not want to be with the Jets. If you had Breece Hall on a fantasy team, how worried are you that a couple weeks from now he's going to be like, hamstring's a little tight today, quads, I got a little, this calf is bothering me. I'm going to go ahead and sit out this week. What's your level of concern about that?
Oh, if we want to go to the panic meter, I mean, it's total panic. It's definitely a worry, but it's not just for that reason. It's not just that he might get a minor injury and then decide that he's going to sit out with it. It's also just what's the vibe around that team? They traded away 2 great players. The team already wasn't successful before that. You have guys like Breece Hall and maybe others that were hoping to get traded that didn't get traded, right? Guys seem to want out of there. And now they're kind of stuck in this situation where it doesn't seem like it's going to get much better. A very tough matchup for Breece Hall this week, too. He's got to go against the Browns. Yeah. So not only do you not get traded, but now you have to go up against the defense that's given up the second fewest fantasy points to running backs this year. They haven't given up a touchdown to a running back in over a month. It's a really, really bad situation for Breece Hall. And I feel bad for him too, right? And fantasy managers who were stashing Isaiah Davis and fantasy managers who have Breece Hall that were hoping he was going to get out of there and end up in a great situation like the Chiefs. It's so unfortunate. It's really too bad. And now we're going to have to watch him toil there. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up missing time at some point. And it will assume it's a legit injury. We're not going to just take a guess and say, oh, okay, yeah, he's not actually hurt. He's just sitting out. Running backs get hurt. He might actually get hurt. But it's a valid point that when guys have contract situations, when guys are unhappy, and they have some of those injuries that they normally would try to play through, will we see him play through any of that? I don't know that we will, right? And is he even going to be back with this team next year? I certainly don't think that's going to be the case unless they get active as one of the tags or something like that and find a way to keep him. So it's a bad situation all around in real life. It's a bad situation for fantasy. And you just it ends up leaving you with a bad taste in your mouth because you think about what could have been the Chiefs offense with Breece Hall. You can't tell me that he wouldn't have brought a new explosive, exciting element to that backfield. And as much as a Bills fan, I'm glad they didn't do it. As a fantasy manager and a fantasy analyst, I definitely wish that would have happened.
Oh, I mean, Breece Hall, I retweeted this earlier this week. He liked a tweet talking about Chiefs general manager Brett Veach saying, guy traded a third for Kadarius Toney, but Breece Hall is where we draw the line, and Breece Hall liked the tweet. So, I mean, he wanted to be a Chief. I think everybody except the Jets wanted him to be a Chief. That's where we're at. So definitely a bummer that he is going to play out the string for this Jets team. But I think it can still be okay for him as long as he's ready to rock going forward. But let's get to your last question here before we go to break.
Which running backs should you be buying in the second half? And the last few weeks, we've talked about a few questions like this, guys who could break out, guys who are potential sleepers. But again, I write that buy sell column every week. And when you get to this point in the year, you start to turn your focus to the stretch run and what can guys do potentially on the way to the fantasy playoffs, in the fantasy playoffs. and can they get you a fantasy championship? And I have 4 guys here that I want to talk about that I think people need to be moving heaven and earth to try to get them on their rosters. The first one, Jaylen Warren on the Steelers. And Harmon, you don't hear me talk about the Steelers very often as an offense that I want people to go out and buy. And yet Warren right now is set up so well on the season, just the RB19 in fantasy points per game. And he's maintained like a pretty steady, like 60-ish% of the snaps. So he is the clear lead back. We're not seeing Caleb Johnson really step up and take over this backfield or really get involved much at all. Exactly. Kenneth Gainwell, just like that backup. And Kenneth Gainwell, a fine stash for fantasy, a guy that when he gets into the lead back role, if there's an injury, he's shown that he can do something with it, but he's not really that involved. He's not taking this job away from Warren. So he's the lead back in an offense that faces the Chargers this week. So that one's not a great matchup necessarily, not the easiest. But then the Bengals in week 11, the Bears in week 12, the Bills in week 13, the Ravens in week 14, and the Dolphins in week 15, the first week of the fantasy playoffs. Those are all positive matchups for fantasy running backs. 4 of them are inside the top 8 for most fantasy points allowed to the position. And we just haven't seen any reason to think that there's going to be anyone taking significant touches away from Jaylen Warren. So he is a guy that I think this is setting up so nicely for him. So is Quinshon Judkins on the Browns. And this is a guy that I've talked about before. He suffered a shoulder injury before the bye that forced him to leave early in week 8, but back at practice coming off the bye. The expectations, all signs are that he's going to play this week. And he's going up against that very Jets defense we were talking about earlier that might be kind of demoralized because they just lost 2 of their best players. And this is an extremely rare occasion because the Browns are actually favored on the road here. There could be some positive game script for Judkins, and we know he's not overly involved in the passing game. So you want a contest where he's going to be able to, the team's going to keep it close or potentially be leading. This is a weird scenario where they very well might be in this one. So that's very important. And he is a guy that has been really, really solid for fantasy. RB12 in fantasy points per game over the first 7 weeks before he got hurt in that week 8 contest. And his schedule the rest of the way, so tempting here. The Jets, the Ravens, the Raiders, the 49ers, the Titans, the Bears, and the Bills over his next 7 games. So 6 of those defenses are plus matchups for fantasy backs. The 7th is the 49ers, who we talked about off the top. They're still kind of searching for a new identity after all the injuries that they had. So I'm valuing Judkins as a top 15 fantasy running back the rest of the way. And I could definitely see him be an RB1. And I think he's just kind of a bit out of sight, out of mind because he's with the Browns and just, because he had the injury and is coming off a bye and all those sorts of things. So try to go out and get him. Chase Brown, we've talked about the Bengals offense and them having a little more pop with Joe Flacco. This is a team that is on bye right now. So you go take a look, see what the manager that has him is doing with their lineup. If they have replacements, if he's on the bench, this is a nice opportunity to try to go and get him. They're not going to need him this week. And he's had some better games with Flacco under center. But the key here, Samaje Perine suffered a high ankle sprain in that last game that Cincy had, and that's going to keep him out. They've already said it's going to keep him out a few weeks, so they have the bye. He'll try to get healthy, but I'm guessing he's going to miss some time after that as well. And in his absence, we saw Brown play the most that he's played all year, 96% of the snaps in the last game. That is absurd. He was down at like 50, 60% some weeks. We were seeing Perine get more involved. Not anymore. I don't think they trust anyone else in that backfield. Perine was like the veteran guy that I think they had a lot of faith in. If he's not out there, this is the Chase Brown show. He just had his 3rd straight game with over 100 scrimmage yards to talk about that recent success, the recent production. And down the stretch from week 13 on, another guy with a good schedule. Obviously, that's a common theme here for these guys I'm targeting. The Ravens, the Bills, the Ravens again, and the Dolphins. Those are all top 8 matchups for fantasy running backs. So I know it was a tough start to the season. I know Chase Brown was somebody that I was recommending throughout the summer, throughout draft season. Didn't get off to that good start for a variety of reasons. Now I think he actually might have a strong finish and help you get there. And then the last one is obvious, so we don't need to spend too much time on it. But Derrick Henry, do you not just try to go trade for Derrick Henry at this time every year? But Lamar Jackson back healthy. the offense looking much better, obviously. And Henry just tends to be that bulldozer. When we get to late November into December, you're going to see Derrick Henry putting up big games, finding the end zone. And I'm looking at matchups that he has against that depleted Jets defense in week 12. He's got a pair of meetings, too, with the number one opponent for fantasy running backs. Gets to face the Bengals in week 13 and the Bengals in week 15, that first week of the fantasy playoffs. So the first week of the fantasy playoffs is one that you should be targeting. If your league doesn't have buys, if you have to play in that one, if you're not set up to get a buy, you want to make sure your roster is strong. You go week by week at that point. So you focus on that one. Don't get too crazy and look at week 17 and think about, well, if I make it to the fantasy championship. No. You'll deal with that when you get there. Focus on week 15. Make sure you get the win and move on. And basically all these guys on this list have good matchups to start the fantasy playoffs. And most of them have very solid matchups all along the way there as well.
I love it. That was great analysis on all those guys. And I actually think it went in order of easiest to most difficult to trade for in terms of Warren down there to Henry. And yeah, Derrick Henry too, not to mention just another variable on that. The Ravens defense is definitely looking better. You know, it's trending in the right direction now at this point. Of course, like you beat down on the Dolphins. That's not surprising. But, you know, Kyle Hamilton moving around, being that movable chess piece, I think that really matters for this defense's outlook the rest of the way. And if that defense is better, Derrick Henry will be in those better game scripts for him to be that late season hammer. So I really love that. And yeah, no, great list. I think all those guys are really good trade candidates right now. And Chase Brown, the Samaje Perine thing cannot be overstated. They signed Samaje Perine just to be a snap eater so that they didn't have to play Chase Brown on 90% of the plays like they did last year. Well, guess what, buddy? They're back to doing that. So I think Chase Brown is locked and loaded rest of the way. But great list. All guys that I think are really good buys right now. We are going to take our next quick break. When we come back, it's time for literally no one's games of the week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, welcome back. It is time to get into literally's no one's games of the week. God, that yawn always fires me up, especially when I bungle the word literally.
No, this segment is like a challenge for you. It's like it starts off with the yawn. It's like all sleepy, and you got to like fire everybody up. You got to get everybody going here about these games, Harmon. Let's try to do it.
Well, admittedly, I am also kind of putting a new spin into the segment where I'm sharing the game that I just didn't have the stomach for to put in here, which is this week it's Browns at Jets, Which, I mean, true, like, it's the correct answer for the spirit of the segment. That is, I don't even think the Jets players think it's their game of the week. They're probably more locked into Monday and Sunday Night Football or whatever than their own game, potentially, after what happened in that building this week. So that is, but what was I going to say? You know, again, I'm trying to pitch these as you got to care about this from a fantasy standpoint. What do you care about in Browns at Jets that you don't already know about? So that was, sort of galaxy brain segment here.
I just talked about Quinshon Judkins in the last one too. That might be the only thing that I could get excited and fired up about for this game. So let's watch Quinshon Judkins just run all over a sad and depressed Jets defense. That's basically what this game is going to turn into.
I do need to know if I should start Harold Fannin or Colson Loveland in my guillotine league. So you noodle on that for a while there, and then you can get back to me on that. And
let me find a coin. I think my rankings have them back to back, so I might need a coin here for us.
I know. That's why I'm confused, because I got some guys on bye this week. I don't have Jaden Daniels anymore. I need to get this one right, and I'm definitely gonna get it wrong. Okay, let's get into the first game here of literally no one's games of the week. Number 1, Lions at Commanders. I think this is officially off the game of the week radar. Look at Debo on this graphic. He's like, what am I doing up here? Game of the week? Why is this graphic up here? Debo's suspicious about what the Commanders are going to do in this game, as am I. The Marcus Mariota-led Washington Commanders playing the Detroit Lions in Washington. I just feel like, my God, the Lions are going to boat race this Commanders team right now. Their defense is so bad in so many different ways that the Lions are perfectly able to take advantage of. That, I think, from the passing game standpoint, I am actually interested, Boone. This guy I don't think ever comes up in the panic meter discussion because he's still been good, but Jahmyr Gibbs has been kind of mildly underwhelming for where you probably took him in fantasy, and David Montgomery has been about impossible to predict in fantasy football in terms of when he's going to have these like big games, other than the Cincinnati Bengals game, which everybody knew he was going to dunk on the Bengals because the Bengals are the Bengals, and that was like a homecoming game for him, his sister in the crowd, the whole deal. Other than that, I haven't been able to get the David Montgomery weeks right. What's going on with this Lions ground game, especially as they're now dealing with injuries on the offensive line as well?
I think, last week's down performance from Gibbs, I think, was maybe just more of a matchup thing with like Brian Flores and the way they were attacking them. It kind of seemed like that was the case. I think that was more of a one-off. So I'm not that worried about Gibbs. Like, he still had some really big contests. Montgomery, it's kind of gone exactly as we thought it would before the season. Now, like you said, trying to pick which weeks he's going to find the end zone, that can be tough. But I think you want to look at games where this offense as a whole is going to have success, and you just figure that that's going to give you an increased chance that he might be the guy who gets across the goal line. And this is going to be one of those games. So I think Montgomery gets a little bit of a boost here. And I just wonder, like, is this the time now to start buying back into this Lions offense? And I know last week, like, they had some good performances fantasy wise. There were some good stat lines for sure out of that game. Even though, Jahmyr Gibbs didn't necessarily have them, but the receivers, we've seen some guys actually produce here. But the rest of the way, one of the reasons that I was down on them early in the season was trying to figure things out with a new coordinator, and some of the issues in the offensive line have continued, obviously. But there was a bunch of outdoor games early in the season. And when we start to look at the schedule the rest of the way, their final 6 games of the fantasy season, including the fantasy playoffs, they're all indoor contests. So it's going to be 4 games at home in that stretch. Do we start to see this offense really hit its stride down the stretch? I think it's going to. So I think this is a team that you might want to start to gauge what the managers are willing to take for them in a trade and see if you can get some of these guys on your offense, especially a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. If his manager's panicking by any means, you try to get him. But overall, I just think you might want to dabble again in this Lions offense because I think they're going to have more good games than bad down the rest of the way.
Yeah, Penei Sewell got a limited practice in today, which I think is a good sign for him, as Christian Mahogany also went on IR this week. So again, that offensive line a little bit banged up, but that's a good sign. On the other side, Commanders, I can't make like a positive case for basically anybody on this team right now, and I feel like you're probably in the same boat there.
Yeah, we talked about like Bill Krosky-Merritt and some of the struggles of that backfield, and overall we shouldn't even be talking about them because I think we put them in Coping Corner on Monday as a group. So
good point. Yeah, what are we doing?
Much to say
what
here.
Are we doing? Good point. So the second game here, this is an AFC South matchup. Jaguars at Texans. We're going to get a Davis Mills start here for the Houston Texans. And yeah, I know. Oof. We have a long catalog of Davis Mills starting for the Texans. I when I tweeted about CJ Stroud being out of that game last week, against the Broncos, it's people are like, oh, good news for Nico Collins. I'm like, you guys know we have a long history of Davis Mills and Nico Collins together. And if you remember, those were the years where people thought Nico Collins wasn't good because he had Davis Mills throwing to him. So I'm a little skeptical about what this Texans offense, which I've already not felt great about this year, looks like on Sunday with Davis Mills behind center. And then obviously on the other side, we're really interested to see what this receiver room looks like. You and I had a really good conversation about Parker Washington and his usage from the slot in when we were talking about him as a waiver wire pickup. And I noted like, hey, he had his best game of the season when playing over 60% of the passing snaps in the slot. And then they trade for Jacoby Myers, who was playing slot for the Raiders, but can win outside. And then Liam Cohen watched our segment, Boone, and he comes out and says, hey, yeah, we're going to leave Parker Washington in the slot and Jacoby Myers is going to start outside. I'm being facetious. Obviously, Liam does not watch the show. But I think that's good news if you are trying to stream a Parker Washington, even if this is a difficult matchup here.
Yeah, because it's going to take a little time for Jacoby Myers to get up to speed in this offense, of course. And then just so many injuries, like BTJ potentially going to be out for this one. Dammy Brown in concussion protocol. Tim Patrick might be back. I think he's practicing in full this week. He missed the last game. Tim Patrick might even be just like a dart throw flex option in this one, because they're going to have to throw to somebody out there, right? And it's not just going to be the Parker Washington show. They're not getting much from the tight end position. So yeah, it's going to be a weird game. The other thing, and I don't even know if I should comment on this, but look at the necks on these quarterbacks.
Oh,
I know
yeah,
everyone wants to make the Davis Mills joke, but like Trevor Lawrence, not far off here. Just very strong neck games from these guys. But yeah, overall, the receiving core here for the Jags, it's a weird situation where Parker Washington is a guy that you could play right now. You could play in the short term. But man, I don't know. It takes kind of the wind out of my sails as a guy that I talked about in the waiver wire column. And now somebody that I think in a couple weeks time when BTJ is back, when Jacoby Myers is back, even if Parker Washington's playing in the slot, there's going to be some target competition now that I don't think he's going to have huge games. I don't think he's going to be somebody that you're going to feel great about. But in the short term, you can definitely use him as a wide receiver 3 flex option.
Do you have any thoughts on this running back rotation right now in Jacksonville? Basil Tutin got in the end zone, and they were kind of using him around the goal line, and ETN's just kind of faded as the year has gone on. Do you have any kind of cope for the Travis Etienne people out there?
No, I think ETN looked a little bit better last week, and it really hasn't changed that much. Like, we still have LaQuint Allen Jr. getting involved in this backfield, so Basil Tutin remains just like a very high upside stash. Somebody that is like a desperation flex because he does find the end zone sometimes, but he's not putting up huge yardage totals. Not a guy that you could feel that comfortable having in your flex spot. So no, I think this backfield continues the way it's been, which is Travis Etienne being the lead back and being a guy that, needs to break some big plays and find the end zone. He hasn't done that as much recently, but still he is the lead back unquestioned right now. And I don't think Tutin's going to take that job away from him unless he gets hurt.
I think that's right. Okay, last game here, Giants at Bears. I wanted to bring this game up for 2 reasons. One, because there's always interesting questions to discuss with the Chicago Bears. The second one, though, Boone, don't you just feel like, for whatever reason, because last week was such a big rug pull with the Tyron Tracy stuff where, he's an instant running back too because he was behind Cam Scatterboone. Last year they used him over Devin Singletary, and then Devin Singletary outsnaps Tyron Tracy this past weekend. Don't you just feel like in a very gettable matchup here, Tyron Tracy's going to go off? Don't you just get that like stupid fantasy football feeling? That's what I feel about this Tyron Tracy thing. And everybody's going to have benched him. Nobody's going to play him, but it's going to happen here in this really good matchup.
I think I have him ranked like RB 25 or 26. I still have him well ahead of Devin Singletary. And yeah, I think we got to give it more than one game before we assess that it's going to be Devin Singletary as the back that's going to get more volume in that backfield. So yeah, I still think there's a strong chance. I mean, we saw it happen last year where Tyron Tracy Jr. took over that backfield when Devin Singletary was there. And as I've mentioned a bajillion times, put up low end RB2 stats. from week 5 on, we could definitely see something like that happen again. So yeah, don't give up on Tracy just yet. Look at your other options that you have, but he's still in that kind of borderline low-end RB2, high-end RB3 range.
Yeah, and on the Bears side of things, again, the big question for me is just the Colson Loveland breakout. Is this something where the rest of the season he becomes one of those second half of the season rookies that you really needed? I think I'm trending more towards yes. I know Cole Kmet missed last week's game, and obviously that was a big part of it, and they played the Bengals. The Bengals are the best matchup for tight ends on the board. But the Giants defense isn't that good, so I think this is an area where he can get going again. And I just think Colson Loveland looked too good to kind of put the genie back in the bottle. And he's a guy the coaches have obviously really liked, so I'm very excited about him. And I think this is a good bounce back spot for Rome Odunze as well. You know, not just because his dad is tweeting it into existence, but also this Giants team is very man coverage heavy, and Rome has been their answer against man coverage. Just depends on how healthy the heel is, as we discussed on Monday. But those are two bearish storylines, in addition to the running back rotation, which we discussed earlier.
Yeah, this is a pretty nice spot for them overall. The matchup's pretty good, so let's hope that we can get Rome Odunze going. Yeah, I hope that injury isn't something that nags him the rest of the season. And I'm with you on Colson Loveland, that I truly believe we might be in the midst of a breakout here. And Cole Kmet, I'm pretty sure, is in concussion protocol, so we'll see if he can get cleared. But most guys miss one game when they're in concussion protocol, so if he's out, then boom, we got another really big performance on the way, I think, from Loveland. And at that point, you're pretty much going to start him the rest of the way. Like right now, rest of the season, I have him ranked as a low-end tight end 1 for fantasy, and I'm not moving off that. He was a very talented rookie, and I think he's a guy that's going to be a meaningful fantasy asset the rest of the season.
All right, I think I'm going to start Colson Loveland over Harold Fannin in this Guillotine League. So good luck to me and my neck. It's not as large as Davis Mills or Trevor Lawrence, but it could be chopped after the Guillotine League mess up if I screw this one up. So we shall see. All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, it's time for the Hurry Up Offense. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. Let's get into the Hurry Up Offense. All right, you know it, you love it. This is where Boone and I put 40 seconds or less on the clock and answer some rapid fire questions. Boone, as always, you get to go first.
Which team screwed up the most by not making a real life trade before the deadline on Tuesday?
Who screwed up the most?
And you can't really Breece Hall to the Chiefs. We already talked about a bit, so I won't accept that one.
But that was good. That was going to be the answer.
We can't accept that one. We already discussed it. I'll throw the flag on you if you went with that one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think the 49ers not finding some. No. Let me take it back. The Bengals not dealing Trey Hendrickson was a complete and total unforced error. Like, that guy is not playing for you next year. You are not going anywhere. Get a freaking any pick for him. We're still holding out for a first round pick. You've been holding out for a first round pick forever, and it's not happening. Give me a break.
Don't you know that Joe Burrow's coming back and they're going to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Joe Burrow's always about to come right back. Well, don't worry. Okay. I'll get into my first one here. Just easy question. What's your favorite team to watch in the NFL right now? And it can't be your Bills.
Wow. No, that's a pretty good one. Honestly, for all the things I said about Devontae Adams earlier, it might be that Rams offense with the way Stafford's playing and getting to see so many great fantasy assets out there, and the amount of passing touchdowns, which is always very exciting. So they would be high up. If you want to talk about an individual, though, it's probably Jackson Dart. Like, he is just so electric out there this season. And it's to watch him do what he's been doing in that environment and continue to produce for fantasy and continue to make exciting plays. It's too bad that we're not getting that combination of him and Scatterbo anymore this season, but overall, yeah, I would say team-wise, Rams, player-wise, Jackson Dart if I can't go with any Bills. Once Garrett Wilson is healthy, which it could be this week, he's back at practice, how will you be valuing him rest of season?
Wide receiver 1, rest of the season. You're going to have to live with the weeks where he gives you, 53 yards or whatever, but he's also going to give you, he's going to give you big time weeks as well. I think, they know how to use him. If he's healthy, he's going to be good. So I think wide receiver 1, rest of season. I am interested to see what A.D. Mitchell does from just even just a sacrificial X receiver question as well here.
No, I think that's a great call. He was the wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game before he got hurt too. So he could definitely put up some big performances down the stretch.
Okay. Quarterback starter to mount a game-winning drive to save your life. Okay. This guy has to mount a game-winning drive and if he doesn't, that's it for Justin Boone. Tyler Shuck or Dylan Gabriel. Which one are you picking?
I love this question. And it doesn't matter.
About it. I just want to paint this. No, I'm painting no opponents, but I'm painting the scenario. This is fourth quarter, so consider the pass rush. Consider we got to hit deep shots here. Come on.
I don't know who else is on the team, or just putting it on them with like a generic team out there.
Yep.
Which quarterback would I want to put my faith in? I'm going to go with Dylan Gabriel because it's exciting. And, the little guy coming through, the underdog story, I'm going to put my faith behind him, but I'm not going to feel good about it, man. Definitely not. You've been asking me a ton of would you rather type questions. So I have one for you this week. Would you rather never watch football again in your entire life, or be forced to live through snowy Canadian winters all year long for the rest of your life?
Oh, give me the winter.
No more summer for you, no more spring. You are snowy Canadian winter, 12 months a year, but you get to watch football or no football.
Yeah. Yeah. No, number one, as I've said over and over again, if there's no football and I'm not doing this, I have no clue what I'm doing with my life. No freaking clue. So I'm not really ready to start all over again. And also, I can do winter. I don't like to do it, but I can do it. I definitely still have some California bro in me where I am not fully equipped for cold, but I can get used to it. And also, I look really good in winter fashion. So I think I can pull off the Canadian winter.
Nice. I like it.
All right. Last one here for today. As you mentioned, it's time. Would you rather have to rewatch Game 7 of Blue Jays Dodgers every day of your life, or finish last in the rankings contest? And for the people out there who think this is too mean of me to ask, I'm going to say it. I did not come up with this question. I think you can guess, Boone, who came up with this question based on his yapping in the green room. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at that. So which one would you rather do?
Do I get to watch it the way that I actually watched it? Like,
no,
do I get to continue?
No.
It's not.
No.
Because I was at a party. It was quite fun.
Yeah, no, none of that. You got to just sit down and like watch it in a chair.
This is a tough one, but I'm going to say watch it. And I'm just going to say it because it was a great game. Even though my team lost, even though it was heartbreaking, they had so many chances. It was still a great game. And I'm not a huge baseball fan, but it was a fantastic game. So I would still do that. You still haven't found the thing that's going to pull me away from finishing last in that contest. I'm not doing it.
But I will say, I think that was the one that you struggled with the most. I felt like so far.
It definitely took me a second.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'll go back with the dinosaurs, whatever. I'll live on a life at sea. But watching Blue Jays Game 7 again, that's funny.
The graphics have a lot to do with it because those other graphics I looked quite happy, and this one I look very, very sad.
That's a great point. Yeah, and in the prehistoric one, you were kind of like jacked. This one, I don't know. It's just it's not quite the whole situation there. So that's a fair point. Shout out to producers continuing to get some great graphics for these Boone hypotheticals. Thank God, honestly. I thought it was pretty mean that an unnamed producer came up with that question. Again, an unnamed producer came up with that question. I thought it was a little mean. But it did help me because I did not have any good ones this week worked up. So I gotta step my game up. That is for sure. But that is going to do it for today's show. Important to note for those of you out there who have been in the chat, we love you. We see you. If you have some specific questions, we have a show for you. Every Friday, John Daigle goes live for a Q&A on this YouTube channel at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. He's here for you to answer all of your fantasy questions in real time. So be sure to tune into that. That is going to do it for this show today. We're going to be back, though, for our Sunday recap with Chris Allen. He and I will be going live as soon as the late game windows end. When Rams-Niners hits 0-0, when Devontae Adams dunks on Boone with a couple of touchdowns in that game, you come right here. We're going to be live. Join us on YouTube for the whole deal. Until then, we are out.